Welcome back, guys. If you are just joining us, this is INX Prime Live. Remember, we are on your screens every single Monday to Friday between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. Now, there's just over 1.3 billion people on the African continent, but around 350 million people of African descent live in the diaspora, which is obviously the Americas, Europe, and other parts of the world, including the Arab world as well. Now, it's an honor to welcome Prime Minister of the State of the African Diaspora, who is Dr. Louis George Tin. He will actually be elaborating further on the journey to recognition by the African Union and so much more as well. We do have him in studio right now. Good evening, Your Excellency. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on INX Prime Live.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
So it's a pleasure having you. I want to get into this conversation. I know I just mentioned it now. There's about 1.3 million, people in that sense. I say billion people, but we're looking at about 350 million of them, obviously out there in different continents, be it in Europe, be it out in the Americas as well, or in the rest of the diaspora as well. Just understanding the vast aspect of your constituency in that sense. I wanted to know more about the African Union and understanding, being recognized by the African Union. How's that process looking so far? And are you going to end up winning in terms of that process?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I would say everything started in 2003 when the head of state of the African Union decided that the African diaspora shall be recognized as the sixth region. Because, on this continent we have 5 regions, north, south, east, and center, but the diaspora is the sixth region. And based on that, I was given a mandate to create a body to represent this diaspora, and this is how we presented the state of the African diaspora to the African Union.
No, I love that. And I think just understanding your role as well, I think whenever you look at any person in a position of power or leadership, be it a CEO, CFO, CMO, you can understand, in a corporate setting, what's their positioning. There are, for example, a chief marketing officer, a chief financial officer. When it comes to being, obviously, the prime minister of something as large as this, it's important for us to maybe also understand some of your duties that you have. So maybe what are some of those duties, but also how were you actually elected? What was the process like for getting elected?
Well, I would say my duty is like being in the center of an orchestra. So my job is to make in coordination between the different people. We've got, of course, the ministers, we've got the parliament, we've got the royal chamber, and all of that needs to work together, which means to provide development to Africa through the diaspora, and reversely. So that's what we're doing every day.
That's beautiful. I mean, just looking at Africa as a continent as well, right, Prime Minister? If you're looking at the fact that Africa is growing, it's one of the, if not the fastest growing continent at this current moment. We believe by 2030 it will be the fastest growing. Also in terms of some of the countries in Africa, like, for example, your Kenyas, your Tanzanias, a lot of your Rwandas, they tend to be taking the lead in terms of growing the economy. But we also know for many, many years, there's a lot of Africans that decided to try their luck going to other continents, be it Europe, be it the Americas, and actually died or struggled so much to be able to get to a point where, they're earning a great living or they're doing well. What's your opinion on that in particular?
It's clear that we need to keep our young people in their countries. So we need to provide development, because I cannot blame them for reaching out to other countries. But if they had more opportunities on the continent, they would remain. We have a capacity to become the first economy in the world for the next generation. Believe me, people may not understand, but we already have a very large GDP, not to mention the underground resources. Now is the time for working together with the family. When Africa has a problem, there's no need to run out and see we're going to discuss with United States, Europe, or China, or Russia, or anybody else. We have our family. So I think the diaspora needs Africa, and Africa needs the diaspora, and this is all we need to develop ourselves.
That's very, very true. We're getting a lot of questions and comments coming in from social media as well. We have a comment saying that, we definitely need people like you, Prime Minister, to be able to elevate the, the experience of Africa and what people can actually see in terms of the African continent. But we also have another comment coming in from Enoch, more of a question actually from Enoch. He was saying, in terms of the election that just passed now in the US, who were you actually rooting for? We know that obviously Donald Trump ended up winning the election, but were you voting or were you supporting more of Kamala Harris or a Donald Trump?
Well, I'm not supposed, of course, to intervene in their debate. However, I don't want to escape the question. I think for the African diaspora, it's obvious that a racist candidate is not something you would really support. I think it's a bit different for Africa because neither Mrs. Harris nor Mr. Trump did say anything about Africa. So I think, anyway, we need to focus on our own way. So whatever the people want to vote in their own countries, that's their business. We should focus on our own objectives. And in a way, they may choose whoever they like. We need to choose our own destiny.
Yeah, very, very true. And you do look at Africa, for example, African descent in terms of, the constituency that is based in the Americas. There's quite a lot of people that are actually based in, for example, the United States of America, or even in Canada, for example, which is nearby. But I just want to go back to the US elections just to chat about this in particular. If you're looking at Donald Trump, if you're looking, and I'm just going through some of the stats here and some of the stuff that he's done in the previous administration, there isn't the best record when it comes to African American communities and the support that he had for them. What do you think his presidency will mean when it comes to, immigration, also the diaspora as well of the African people?
Well, you know why? In fact, it's obvious that his policies about migration is very strict and tough. So it's going to be a hard time for migrants. However, I want to see that as an opportunity for us to tell our migrants, our young generation, don't go to the United States. They don't want you anyway. Same thing in Europe, and anyway, it's dangerous to go through the sea. Why don't you remain on the continent in your country while we are actually building something? So yes, of course, maybe people may be upset. Many people may be upset about Donald Trump, but I would see that as an opportunity for us to build our own house and not depend on somebody else's house.
Yeah, and we're getting questions and comments coming in just to exactly what you're speaking now. Hloni was saying that he wanted to spend more time, for example, in his own country, but there's so much more opportunities, unfortunately, in Europe. And, if for example, his own country in Africa had more opportunities, he'll definitely choose to stay. What's your opinion on that?
So it's a question for me. It's a responsibility for us to work more and provide these opportunities. Because again, I cannot blame the people who want to leave, but now they have to analyze the situation. Is it possible to leave when the police force is so difficult, when it's so dangerous to go to Europe? And now perhaps we have a chance to build our own future with the diaspora. So instead of Africa going abroad, why not Africans abroad coming home?
Like that, I really do. I'm just listening to some of the other comments. People are speaking about seeing you, for example, at the the Pan-African Parliament, if I'm not mistaken, as well. And that was obviously happening over the last few weeks out in Midrand. I just wanted to know, in terms of your involvement as well, and what does it actually mean to you to be a Pan-African?
Well, because I'm Pan-Africanist, it's very important for me to be in the Pan-African Parliament. So we were privileged and we were invited to attend the ceremony and give a speech for the session. But beyond that, of course, we expect to work more, have a cooperation agreement, build development, not only to South Africa, but through the Parliament to the whole of the continent. So that needs, of course, some kind of political, I would say, collaboration, because, of course, development is about economy, of course, culture, social activities, but also politics is important to have the proper policies and regulations in place. And that's why I came here to have the opportunity to discuss with my colleagues from the continent.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And I'm just looking at some of the comments that are made by, individuals and political leaders that are in South Africa, some of them past, some of them present. Someone like the likes of Mzwandile Messina came out and said, the Pan-African Parliament is of paramount importance to build, one Africa in that sense. And a lot of South Africans feel the same way. But at the same time, we do have one issue in South Africa. It is something that a lot of people complain about from other countries in Africa, and that's obviously the issues around xenophobia, and something that, is still a huge issue in the country. I wanted to know what's your opinion, or what perhaps should the government or our government leaders do? What kind of advice do you have for them when it comes to tackling the issue of xenophobia in South Africa in particular?
I would say that it's the same thing in all the countries of the world. When you see the migrants as problems, they will create more problems. If you see them as opportunities and you, in fact, include them in your family will grow. So it's the same here, it's the same of all the countries. How did the United States become so strong? It's because they have so many migrants in their country. You know, if they had remained just a few people, it wouldn't become a great country. So it just depends on the way how you look the migrants. I'm not saying that there's no issue, but the more you welcome the migrants, the more they will benefit your country. If you exclude them, necessarily they will live on the streets, they will become burglars, they will do bad things, and it will become a vicious circle because you exclude them, they behave in a bad way, they behave in a bad way, and then you exclude them. But if you reverse the tendency, you do the opposite, you provide accommodation, you provide jobs for them, they will enrich your country. So a country like the United States was built on immigration, and many other great countries need immigration. Canada wants to be greater, they need more immigration. They have a policy to have more migrants. So some countries today have a tendency to say, no, we don't want migrants anymore. They're going into decay.
Yeah, very, very, very true. I mean, I just want to touch on that in particular. We are going to be looking at, Africa in that sense. You look at some of our leaders in South Africa and some of the different political leaders as well. For example, we have the EFF, which is a political party in South Africa, and they speak about One Africa quite a lot. Away from that, you're looking at platforms like X and what was called Twitter before. I mean, the hashtag United States of Africa is something that's been pushed out quite a lot and been trending quite a lot. What's your idea or your vision in terms of an idea like the United States or the United States of Africa in that sense, where we have one Africa and all of these different countries form part of a bigger vision?
You know, it was the dream of our ancestors, Kwame Nkrumah, a few others. Unfortunately, that was derailed by some people from Europe. We need to find a way to recreate the dream and make it a reality. That's part of my mandate.
That's brilliant. And I mean, just in closing, before we actually let you go as well, Prime Minister, there is a lot of young people in South Africa, but all around Africa. Africa is known as the youngest continent in the whole world in terms of its people and its age demographic as well. What advice do you have for all of the young people in Africa? We have a lot of entrepreneurs. We have a lot of people who are out there very ambitious, but looking for that opportunity to grow themselves as well. In a business perspective, what advice do you have for all of the youth of Africa?
Can I tell you a little story?
Yeah.
I was in Benin perhaps 7 or 8 years ago, and I was campaigning for restitution of the Beninese artifacts. You may know that 95% of the artifacts of Africa are detained out of Africa. So I came to Benin to campaign, to discuss with the president, and I was walking back to my hotel, and a little boy, well, he was probably 20 years old, he stopped me in the street and said, "Oh, I thought I saw you on television. You're the guy campaigning for our treasures." I said, "Yes, that's me." He said, "Well, do you really think that will ever happen?" And I said, "Yes, I think so. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's worth trying, and I think it will be achieved, and that's why I'm coming. I'm using my time, energy, money to do so, to achieve that." And his eyes were very skeptical, and then I could see the light in his eyes, and he said, "You know what? I need to build my garage." I understood the message. This guy, he told me, confirmed, he had been dreaming of building a garage. He was passionate about cars. And he always said, because he's young, he's poor, he's black, he's African, he will never make it. So he didn't try. Because you don't try, you don't make it. Because you don't make it, you don't try, etc. Therefore, he saw somebody like me trying to do something that seemed so difficult, but still trying. And he said, well, if this guy is trying to do something like that, I should also pursue my own dream. So I'm saying to the African youth, you don't have to become an expert of African art. And by the way, we managed to get restitution for Benin.
All done. Yeah.
So it was possible. And myself, I'm not an expert of art. But we want these African boys and girls to become experts of their dreams. The guy wanted to build a garage, which is, by the way, the symbol of reparation, isn't it? So everybody needs to be expert about their dreams. They need to know how to repair the damage that was done to us and know how to build a new future. So the message is never forget about your dreams, make them a reality.
No, I really appreciate that. And I mean, also just looking at mindset is such an important thing. Just in closing, before we let you go, I mean, you are the Prime Minister and you play such an important role. You definitely have your own foresight and vision. What are some of your goals and plans for the next few years in terms of your position currently?
Well, I would say in terms of politics, we need to reinforce our connections with all the institutions of the continent. Now, in terms of development, our main program, I would say, is probably a program to build smart cities on the continent. Because we have so many houses to build. In Nigeria only, there is a need of 60 million houses according to the government. Can you imagine? With all our population. But when you build the houses, you bring, of course, the water, of course, electricity, the Wi-Fi, the agriculture around. You build all the infrastructure that is necessary for roads and everything. So it's something that is rather comprehensive. And all these smart cities need to be nice, beautiful, have their own identity, and they need to be a place of well-being. It's not only building some, concrete on the ground. It's about building the future. So that's something very concrete, but something based on a vision. We will have a city of diamond, the city of light, the city of fabric and fashion. And here also, I hope we can do something. So that's why we have engaged the government of South Africa, and the funds are available. We would like to contribute to the continent because, we didn't have the opportunity to do so because we were deported. Now is the time for self-reparation, and now is the time for building our future together.
That's very, very exciting times as well. But Doctor, thank you so much for joining us tonight on INX Prime Live. Awesome, guys. That is Dr. Louise George Tin, who is actually the Prime Minister of the State of the African Diaspora, just sharing with us more information about the beauty of the African people, the African continent, but more specifically, the African dream to build one united Africa for all. On that note, we are going to take a quick ad break. We'll come right back.